A true story, repeated word for word as I heard it, by Mark Twain. It was summertime and twilight. We were sitting on the porch of the farmhouse on the summit of the hill, and Aunt Rachel was sitting respectfully below our level on the steps, for she was our servant and colored. She was of mighty frame and stature. She was 60 years old, but her eye was undimmed and her strength unabated. She was a cheerful, hearty soul, and it was no more trouble for her to laugh than it is for a bird to sing. She was under fire now, as usual, when the day was done. That is to say, she was being shaved without mercy and was enjoying it. She would let off peal after peal of laughter, and then sit with her face in her hands and shake with throes of enjoyment where she could no longer get breath enough to express. In such a moment as this, a thought occurred to me, and I said, "Aunt Rachel, how is it that you've lived 60 years and never had any trouble?" She stopped quaking. She paused, and there was a moment of silence. She turned her face over her shoulder toward me and said, without even a smile in her voice, "Mr. C, is you in earnest?" It surprised me a good deal, and it sobered my manner and my speech too. I said, "Why, I thought, that is, I meant, why, you can't have had any trouble. I've never heard you sigh and never seen your eye when there wasn't a laugh in it." She faced fairly around now and was full earnestness. "Has I had any trouble, Mr. C? I's going to tell you, and then I leave it to you. I was born down amongst the slaves. I knows all about slavery, 'cause I'd been one of 'em my own self. Well, sir, my old man, that's my husband, he was loving kind to me, just as kind as you is to your own wife. And we had children, 7 children, and loved them children just the same as you love your children. They was black, but the Lord can't make children so black but what they mother loves them and wouldn't give 'em up, no, not for anything that's in this whole world. Well, sir, I was raised in North Allegheny, but mother, she was raised in Maryland, and my soul, she was terrible when she'd get started. My land, but she'd make the fur fly. When she'd get into them tantrums, she always had one word that she said. She'd straighten herself up and put her fists in her hips and say, 'I want you to understand that I wasn't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue-hens chickens, I is.' 'Cause you see, that's what folks that's born in Maryland calls themselves, and they's proud of it. Well, that was her word. I don't ever forget it, because she said it so much, and because she said it one day when my little Henry tore his wrist off him, and most busted his head right up at the top of his forehead, and the niggers didn't fly around fast enough to tend to him. And when they talked back at her, she up and she says, 'Look here,' she says, 'I want you niggers to understand that I wasn't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue hens chickens, I is.' And then she clawed that kitchen and bandaged up the child herself. So I says that word too, and I was right. Well, by and by, my old missus says she's broke, and she got to sell all the niggers on the place. And when I hear that they gwine to sell us all off at auction in Richmond, oh, the good gracious, I know what that means. Aunt Rachel had gradually risen while she warmed to her subject, and now she towered above us, black against the stars. They put chains on us and put us on a stand as high as this porch, 20 foot high, and all the people stood around, crowds and crowds. And they'd come up down and look at us all round and squeeze our arm and make us get up and walk and then say, "This one too old," or "This one lame," or "This one don't mount to much." And they sold my old man and took him away. They began to sell my children and take them away, and I began to cry. And the man say, "Shut up, you old damn blubber," and hit me on the mouth with his hand. And when the last one was gone but my little Henry, I grabbed him close up to my breast so, and I riz up and says, "You shan't take him away," I says. "I kill the man to touch him," I says. But my little Henry whisper and say, "I gwine to run away, and then I work and buy your freedom." Oh, bless the child, he always so good. But they got him. They got him, the men did. But I took and tear the clothes most off of them and beat him over the head with my chain, and they gave it to me too, but I didn't mind that. Well, there was my old man gone, and all my children, all my 7 children, and 6 of them I ain't set eyes on again to this day, and that's 22 years ago last Easter. The man that bought me belonged in Newbern, and he took me there. Well, by and by the years roll on, and the war come. My master, he was a Confederate colonel, and I was his family's cook. So when the Unions took that town, they all run away and left me all by myself with the other niggers in that monstrous big house. So the big Union officers move in there, and they asked me would I cook for them. "Lord bless you," says I, "that's what I was for." They weren't no small fry officers, mind you. They was the biggest they is. And the way they made them soldiers mosey round. The general, he told me to boss that kitchen, and he say, "If anybody come meddling with you, you just make 'em walk chalk. Don't you be afeard," he says. "You's among friends now." Well, I thinks to myself, if my little Henry ever got a chance to run away, he'd make to the north, of course. So one day I comes in there where the big officers was in the parlor, and I drops a curtsy, so, and I up and told 'em about my Henry. They are listening to my troubles just the same as if I was white folks. And I says, what I come for is because if he got away and got up north where you gentlemen comes from, you might have seen him maybe, and could tell me so as I could find him again. He was very little, and he had a scar on his left wrist and at the top of his forehead. Then they looked mournful, and the general says, "How long since you lost him?" And I say, 13 years. Then the general say he wouldn't be little no more now. He's a man. I never thought of that before. He was only that little fella to me yet. I never thought about him growing up and being big. But I see it then. None of the gentlemen had run across him, so they couldn't do nothing for me. But all that time, though I didn't know it, my Henry was run off to the north for years and years, and he was a barber too and worked for himself. And by, when the war come, he ups and he says, "I's done barbering." He says, "I's going to find my old mammy, less'n she's dead." So he sold out and went to war. They was recruiting and hired himself out to the colonel for his servant, and then he went all through the battles everywhere, hunting for his old mammy. Yes, indeed, he'd hired a first one officer and then another till he'd ransacked the whole South. But you see, I didn't know nothing about this. How was I going to know it? Well, one night we had a big soldier ball. The soldiers at Newbern was always having balls and carrying on. They had 'em in my kitchen heaps of times because it was so big. Mind you, I was down on such doings because my place was with the officers, and it rasped me to have them common soldiers cavorting around in my kitchen like that. But I always stood round and kept things straight, I did. And sometimes they'd get my dander up, and then I'd make 'em claw that kitchen, mind I tell you. Well, one night, it was a Friday night, they comes a whole platoon from a nigger regiment that was on guard at the house. The house was headquarters, you know, and then I was just a bilin' mad. I was just a booming. I swelled around and swelled around. I just was a itching for 'em to do something for me to start with. And they was a waltzing and a dancing. My, but they was having a time. And I just a swelling and a swelling up. Pretty soon, along comes such a spruce young nigger a-sailing down the room with a yaller wench round the waist. And round and round and round they went. Enough to make a body drunk to look at 'em. And when they got abreast of me, they went to kind of bouncing around first on one leg and then on the other and smiling at my big red turban and making fun. And I ups and says, "Get along with you, rubbish." The young man's face kind of changed all of a sudden for about a second, but then he went to smiling again, same as he was before. Well, about this time, in comes some niggers that played music and belonged to the band, and they never could get along without putting on airs. And the very first air they put on that night, I lit into 'em. They laughed, and that made me worse. The rest of the niggers got to laughing, and then my soul alive, but I was hot. My eye was just a-blazing. I just straightened myself up so, just as I is now, plumb to the ceiling most, and I digs my fists into my hips, and I says, "Look-a here," I says. "I want you niggers to understand that I wasn't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue hens chickens, I is." And then I see that young man stand a-staring and stiff, looking kind of up at the ceiling like he forgot something and couldn't remember it no more. Well, I just marched on them niggers, so looking like a general, and they just caved away before me and out at the door. And as this young man is going out, I hear him say to another nigger, "Jim," he says, "you go along and tell the captain I'd be on hand about 8 o'clock in the morning. There's something on my mind," he says. "I don't sleep no more this night. You go along," he says, "and leave me by my own self." This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, about 7 I was up, on hand, getting officers' breakfast. I was a-stooping down by the stove, just so, same as if your old foot was the stove. And I'd opened the stove door with my right hand, so, pushing it back just as I pushes your foot. And I'd just got the pan of hot biscuits in my hand and was about to raise up, when I see a black face come round under mine, and the eyes a-looking up into mine, just as eyes a-looking up close under your face now. And I just stopped right there and never budged, just gazed and gazed, so. And the pan began to tremble, and all of a sudden I knowed. The pan dropped on the floor, and I grabbed his left hand and shoved back his sleeve, just so, as I was doing to you. And then I goes for his forehead and pushed the hair back so, and, "Boy," I says, "if you ain't my Henry, what is you doing with this welt on your wrist and that scar on your forehead?" The Lord God of heaven be praised. I got my own again. Oh no, Mr. C. I ain't had no trouble and no joy.